Welcome to In the Spotlight. I'm Abigail Pogrebin. Helen Schulman is a novelist, screenwriter, and short story writer. Her latest novel, Lucky Dogs, was published by Knopf in the summer of 2023. She is also the author of Come With Me, San Francisco Chronicle's 10 Best Books of 2019, This Beautiful Life, a New York Times and international bestseller, A Day at the Beach, P.S., which was made into a movie starring Laura Linney, Gabriel Byrne, Paul Rudd, and Marcia Gay Harden, and for which she has a screenwriting credit, The Revisionist, and Out of Time, a Barnes & Noble discovery book, and the short story collection, Not a Free Show. Helen co-edited the anthology Wanting a Child with Jill Bielowski. Her fiction and nonfiction have appeared in such places as Vanity Fair, Time, Vogue, GQ, the New York Times Book Review, A Public Space, and the Paris Review. She is the fiction chair at the writing program at the New School, where she is a tenured professor of writing. And she is also the executive director of a wonderful program you all should look up and contribute to called WriteOnNYC.com. We will put it on our screen here, which helps students begin to be writers, some who have never had access to great teachers. A 2019 Guggenheim Fellow, Professor Schulman has been a New York Foundation for the Arts Fellow, Sundance Fellow, Aspen Words Fellow, a Tennessee Williams Fellow at Columbia University, and the recipient of a Pushcart Prize. Why haven't you accomplished anything, Helen? Seriously.
Thanks.
So let's talk about Lucky Dogs. It's a wonderful book. It's your new novel. I know it's so annoying to ask someone to summarize a book because you want people to take this journey afresh, but most people I know want to have some sense of what they're in for. So give us a preview.
The log line would be two young women who are on opposite ends of a sexual abuse scandal who are pitted against each other and become very involved with each other. But what really got this started was I was reading obsessively about Me Too, which a lot of us were doing at the time, and I was also really interested in civil war. I was worried about what was happening in our own country and in Israel, and for some reason I was very obsessed with Bosnia. When I came across this article by Ronan Farrow about how David Boies, the attorney who was Al Gore's lawyer in Bush v. Gore, but was also Harvey Weinstein's lawyer, went to Ehud Barak, the ex-prime minister of Israel, to find a spy for Harvey to hire to destroy the actress Rose McGowan.
Let's just slow down for a second there. So this is a story by Ronan Farrow.
Right.
In the New Yorker?
It was in the New Yorker.
And basically, David Boies, very high-powered attorney.
Very powerful man.
Represented Gore in Gore v. Bush.
And gay marriage, but also on the Theranos board. Complicated guy. Basically goes to Ehud Barak, the former prime minister, and says, get me a spy. Right,
for Harvey. Harvey Weinstein wants, Weinstein, is it Weinstein? I should know.
Weinstein.
Wants a spy who's basically going to smear Rose McGowan.
Stop her in her tracks from writing her book in which she alleges that he raped her.
And she's an actress, for those who aren't familiar.
She's an actress.
And she had written a book that
she was
a
in
manuscript?
the process of writing the book when he decided she had to be stopped. She then went on and published her book. It was called Brave. And it was about an incident that had taken place 20 years prior around. I'm fuzzier on my facts now than I was at the time. But I was so shocked by this that which
aspect? I mean, there's so
it gets
much.
better, Abby. It's a really good story. I mean, good in that it's shocking, but it shows political contacts and sort of the cabal of the wealthy man and the powerful man. But anyway, I was just fascinated in this. He went to the ex-prime minister of Israel, and where Ehud Barak led him was to a group called Black Cube. Like straight out of the movies, I don't know if you know about Black Cube.
I do, but okay. I'm not sure everyone does.
So Black Cube is an organization of ex-Mossad agents who, after their time in the agency decided they wanted to make some money, and they were private spies. And the spy that they picked was a young woman named Stella Pekanak, who had grown up in Bosnia during the Bosnian War, was a child of a Muslim, one Muslim parent and one Christian Serbian parent. But here's the interesting Jewish part of all this, is that either her grandfather or her great-grandfather, his best friend was a Jewish family during World War II, and they hid the family from the Nazis. The Muslims in Bosnia were very protective and very close to their Jewish neighbors. They had very good relationships, and they really came out for the Jewish community, as did her grandfather. And he ended up going to concentration camp and being killed for what he did.
Because he tried to protect Jews.
He protected them so well that they actually emigrated to Israel.
Wow.
So cut to, she's a little girl growing up in a basement while the war rages in Bosnia, and the Jewish family in Israel decides that they want to pay them back for saving their lives, so they convince the Israeli government that they're righteous Gentiles, and they airlift them to Israel, where she becomes a Jew and grows up to become a spy who's hired by Harvey Weinstein to destroy Rose McGowan.
Amazing. So during the Bosnian conflict, this family is saved by the Israeli relatives, essentially.
The family was saved, or I'll just do it again. It's her family's best friends were Jews.
Right,
they saved them.
that's during the war.
During the
World
war.
War II. But I'm saying during the Bosnian conflict.
Yes. She and her parents were part of the Jew. Very interesting during the Bosnian War what happened to Jews in Bosnia, the remaining Jews, of which there aren't that many after World War II. But there was an expression that was going around that people thought was very funny. It was called "a good time to be a Jew," because for the first time it wasn't the Jews who were being persecuted. In fact, nobody really cared about them while the Christians and the Muslims were killing each other. And the Serbs, it was mass slaughter, and it was, it was just horrible. So, but the Jews helped get people out of Bosnia, and Israel wanted to help save the Jews who were there. But they sent people on bus transports out of the country and to Israel and to other parts of Europe to save them. And her family was one because her great-grandfather, whatever it was a righteous Gentile.
And this is Stella we're talking about.
Right.
And this is who you're basing your character Nina on.
Correct.
So you read this story, and are you like, this is it? This is my novel?
Well, first of all, I was like, how come everything I'm thinking about is in this one story? I mean, it was like, you ever read about Michelangelo looking at the marble, and he could see the sculpture trying to come out of it, and that's how I felt. I felt like it just had been handed to me. But really what animated me, and I'm really the most naive person I know. I mean, I've lived this long, I'm 62, I've seen everything, but I never can believe it. But I couldn't believe, I was like, how could one woman do this to another woman? Somehow, even though I know women do terrible things all the time, the idea that a woman sort of close in age to another woman who had been raped would befriend her, lie to her for money. I thought there was a sisterhood somewhere in the world where really sexual assault was a line you didn't cross, but apparently not. And so I set out to figure out why and how a woman could do that. That was my inspiration. And I came up with a lot of different ideas about why that happened and why the Nina character.
And Nina is the spy.
Nina is the Bosnian
And Meredith
spy.
is the one in LA who is the starlet, who's the very successful, very beautiful Los Angeles kind of success story, but not quite as famous as she wants to be. So she is susceptible in some way to a major director, in this case, you call him the Rug, saying, come up to my hotel room.
Yes, a producer.
A producer.
I mean, yeah, that's basically it. I mean, Mary, actually, she's had her own really hard, tough time. She was self-emancipated at 15. She, She's beautiful, Margot Robbie beautiful. She's Shiksa beautiful. She's perfect. She's all-American beautiful. I mean, Nina is also beautiful, I think, but in a very different way, much more exotic, more masculine, Roman nose, deep voice. All she wants in the world is to be famous and to be a movie star. And Mary is a TV star and starlet maybe. And she's a big hot mess. So that's part of what that they become incredibly involved with each other and attracted to each other and repellent to each other, and they're bitter
enemies. And you see
enemies.
how the trust happens. You see how the ruse is successful. Because when I'm reading it in the book, and you see how Meredith is almost seduced by Nina to the point where she gives up her manuscript about what she's gone through. It's, part of you is thinking, part of me is thinking, why aren't you wake up? Don't you see what they're doing? Don't you see how they're luring you, entrapping you? But the way you describe it, you can see how one sort of falls in love with the idea of this friendship.
Oh, she's so enamored of Nina. Well, first of all, she is attracted to her. I mean, that's part of it. But Nina presents herself as a champion for women, or women who have been abused, that she runs an organization that is about, to help women who have suffered from sexual abuse and trauma. And she says that she has been raped. And Mary's been raped twice, not just by the Rug, this terrible producer, but also as a teenager in Colorado. So, a lot of that has to do with the whole idea of good victim and bad victim. I personally do not think there's such a thing as a good victim and a bad victim, but...
Well, let's just address that terminology for a minute. You've talked about in other interviews that you said we want pristine witnesses. And certainly in the Harvey Weinstein case and in others, if someone had essentially worn the short skirt and then been attacked, there was some sense, and that obviously, I'm just saying this metaphorically, there was a sense of why did you go to his hotel room? Why did you sleep with him if you did? Why did you email him afterwards? These kinds of things that somehow show some either great naivete or even complicity, or mutuality, I guess. So that if somebody wasn't just fully a victim, it was problematic.
Well, but the thing is, if you study victims of rape and sexual abuse, men and women, often they do these things. They want to feel like it wasn't a rape. They want to erase it. They may sleep again with the person who actually assaulted them. They have really often their memory is really messed up, and it's hard for them. Somebody like Harvey, who was such a bully, so vitriolic, so angry at anybody who crossed him. He could keep you from having a career, and he did. He kept a lot of Annabelle Sciorra and Mira Sorvino and plenty of women who were rising in his company, and lots of actresses. He controlled their future. So people sucked it up. I mean, women have sucked it up forever. And also he was alluring, and he was the key to the kingdom. And a lot of these people were, came from hunger. I mean, Mary really did. She had no education. She didn't finish high school. She basically had no parents. All she had was her looks. And her looks were her trap.
I want to just pivot to Sarajevo, because you actually went there. And did you know you were going to take that trip in terms of your research?
No, I wanted to go, and I need work to take me somewhere. I can't afford to take myself, and so I pitched a story to Travel and Leisure on black tourism, dark travel. That's the best way to call it. It's now people are interested in going to places where terrible things happened and re-experiencing them. It's a really strange phenomenon, but it's true. Of course, Travel and Leisure had no interest in that, but they were so great. They called me after, or emailed me, I guess they emailed, nobody calls now, and said, we have a story we're doing on luxury adventure travel in Bosnia. Would you want to do that? And I said, sure. Of course, there is no luxury adventure travel people really in Bosnia, but I went, and I had the best trip of my life. It was crazy and really exciting and all of that. But I went early to Sarajevo, and I interviewed people, and I did a lot of research, and I had already started writing that chapter. I wasn't sure if I was going to start with Mary. The book starts with Mary in Paris after her whole life has exploded. She's hiding out. And then it goes to a chapter with Nina's origin story in Sarajevo and moving to Israel. And I thought I was going to start with Bosnia, but I couldn't capture it till I went. And then I threw out everything I'd written.
And you started
and
over.
I started it again.
And you describe, among many things, just the closeness of the friendships that were suddenly rent asunder, and where literally one neighbor was raping another or killing another, and these are unimaginable things. Obviously they happened in Rwanda as well. But just on the ground, what was the kind of, what memories were you hearing? It's fairly recent history for us
It's
in our
so
lifetime.
fresh. It's like honestly, and there's so little reconstruction in Bosnia, and the Americans
You mean
just
physical?
Physical. You walk down the street and you see buildings that are crumbling and they have mortar fire still in them and they haven't been redone, or trees growing through one half of it while people live in another half. The economy has never come back. Bosnia was divided into three parts. Serbian part, a Bosniak part, and a Croatian part, and they all live together again like they did. But there are three different presidents. They timeshare the presidency. It's really kind of nuts, and there's lack of industry. I mean, what they want is a lot of tourism, and it's one of the most beautiful places I've ever been.
Really?
I mean, it's stunningly beautiful. But I don't think that's happened for them yet.
And what about Israel? Talk about how you researched it and made that come alive in the novel.
Well, so that was in a way more complicated because of the pandemic. I couldn't get to Israel. I'd been to Israel. I'm clearly Jewish. I was born 15 years after the Holocaust ended. I shared a room with my grandmother, who lost 4 siblings to the concentration camps. One of her surviving brothers at 15 left Vienna and went to Israel and to help when it was Palestine before the war, and started one of the first kibbutz. We were raised on Israel as a saving grace for Jews. And so I've always thought about Israel, and I wanted, and I worried about it. Like I worry about here. What Bosnia proves to me is that it can happen anywhere. I was fortunate enough to attend a talk given by the Bosnian writer Alexander Hamon, Sasha Hamon, right after Trump was elected. And he gave a talk and he said, "You think it can't happen to your beautiful country, but I'm here to tell you it can and it will." And it stuck with me. And in my writer's head, it morphed into, "Do you live in a beautiful city?" which is sort of an incantatory sentence that goes on throughout that chapter. But, that really stuck with me. And when I was in Bosnia and I talked to people, yes, best friends raped each other's wives. And yes, people stole each other's apartments and they killed each other's grandmother. And now you're there and they're all living together again. And I kept saying, how can you do that? And they said, what choice do we have? It was 4 years. We lived together before. I mean, granted, it was Czechoslovakia for a long time, and Tito kept it all together, but there was a long, rich history of many different kinds of people living in Bosnia together. And it was all destroyed, and now they're trying to move forward. I don't know if I could be that large.
So you teach writing, creative writing, and obviously have done it for many years. Many people consider you a mentor. When you're writing a book like this yourself, how are you kind of self-instructing or tasking yourself? What are you worried about, just in terms of the actual craft of a book like this?
I was so worried about writing from these two different perspectives. I mean, first of all, I'm old. They're young. I'm not a beautiful shiksa from Colorado. You know, I'm not 24 years old. I am not a movie star.
You're not a Mossad spy.
And I'm not, oh, I'm really not. People think so, but I'm not. Yeah, so there was a lot to take on, but that was the fun part. I mean, I really truly am a fiction writer. I'm not someone who writes about their own life. I don't write autofiction. I really like going into other people's minds and stories and bodies and trying to figure them out. I took acting in college, and I never liked an audience, but I loved going into another character. And so this was really fun for me. But it was like how to balance them. And also, I wanted them both to get a real story. I didn't want one to be the victim and one to be, you know, the terrible one. And there's a little epigram in the front of my book. I just want to read it to you. It comes from Marguerite Duras' The Lover. And it's very early in my life, it was too late. And that's how I felt about both characters, that they had these horrendous beginnings and they're just battling to survive.
So finally, I want to just go to the dedication. You dedicated to both your grandmas. You gave us just a little slice of the grandma who lost people in the Holocaust, but why did you choose to give them that honor?
They were so different. My grandmother, who I lived with, Dora Liebling-Yevish, she was very educated. She spoke 7 languages. She could read and write. She did embroidery. Her father was a caretaker for a Polish lord. And then when World War I came, her whole family was scattered. Her mother died. She came by herself to the United States. My father's mother, Zelda, she was called Jenny Glukowski Schulman. She was illiterate. She couldn't speak, read and write in any language, maybe a little bit of Yiddish, but I have a card. I was very sick when I was a kid, and I have a card she sent me where my aunt, her daughter, wrote out in Yiddish, "I ask God that you should be healthy." And you can see my grandmother's shaky handwriting copying it underneath because she couldn't write it herself.
Wow.
And she came here by herself and brought over like 6 of her brothers and sisters, and she ran a whole business. But both of them told stories, all the time stories. They were great storytellers. The grandmother I lived with told the stories of her young life, I think to keep herself going and to remember all the people she'd lost. And my father's mother just was hilarious. Often they were in Yiddish, and all the adults would laugh, and then somebody would translate it for us. And I think, she would have been the writer if she had been able to read or write. So I feel like their courage created me.
Wonderful. The book is Lucky Dogs. The author is Helen Schulman. Thank you so much, Helen, for being with us on In the Spotlight. I'm Abigail Pogrebin, and I'll see you next time.